Good evening, everyone. Yes, I asked that they turn the lights up, right? So we can see everyone. Great. That's even better. Thank you so much. All right, so once again, good evening. I am Priscilla Hammonds. I am the Assistant Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion at Grange Insurance, but I'm also the Vice President of the Central Ohio Diversity Consortium. And so I have the honor and pleasure of welcoming you all this evening. So again, welcome. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here this evening. We know sometimes it's always challenging to try to make an evening event. And so we are very pleased and happy that all of you are here this evening. So I just have a few comments and remarks to share, and I'll try to be as brief as possible. So the first thing I want to do is send out a lot of thank yous, right? Big thank yous. And so I'm going to go down a list of people that we, the Central Ohio Diversity Consortium, would like to thank for being a part of this evening. First, I'm going to start with the King Arts Complex for allowing us to host the event. So thank you to Darla Reed. I don't know if she's here in the room. Okay, thank you to Darla Reed and her staff. Thank you very much. And next, I'd like to thank Ira Graham Photography and his staff, his lovely wife and handsome son, who are here helping us with the photography and the AV needs. Thank you so much. And next, I'd like to thank the Liquid Crystal Project for the wonderful music. So let's give them a round of applause. Woo! Kind of biased. I really like them. And then let's see next. Okay, next we also have Traditions Event Catering, who provided the wonderful food for us this evening. I really like the little brownie with the cream cheese icing, but the little banana pudding cup was really good too. So thank you so much. And then next, I have to thank our planning committee. As you know, these things don't happen with one person, so there's some folks who were behind the scenes, making the phone calls, making multiple asks for different things. And so the planning committee, we had Lenore Winfrey and Toby Ferguson, and I hope I'm not missing anyone, so thank you so much for all that you did to help us pull this together. So then I'm going to take a second to just put in a plug for the King Arts Complex. If you haven't had a chance to do so, maybe after the event, take a quick tour down their hallway to see the Beatty display of the Beatty's personal art collection. It's really awesome, outstanding. I hope one day I have a collection that can be on display somewhere. So anyway, if you get a moment, please take a look at that. They have some wonderful pieces of their life and their journey. All right, so next, I just want to take a few minutes to tell you just a little bit about the Central Ohio Diversity Consortium. I was talking to a few folks while we were networking, and a few of them said, not quite, how long has this organization existed? Well, let me tell you. So we've been around since 2006, and it all started with a few of us getting together who happened to be working in the diversity and inclusion space. We just got together and said, hey, let's talk. What are you doing? What's working for you? What is it that's challenging for you? What are some best practices and approaches that seem to be working within your organization? So through those personal one-on-one conversations, that then evolved into a number of folks that we found throughout Central Ohio who were also doing the work and needed support and needed an ear, right, to share. As many of you probably know or may have heard, this work isn't always easy. So it's nice to have some folks, that you can vent to, but then, that can uplift you as well to continue on the journey to help diversity and inclusion be a part of your various organizations. And so as a result of that, there were some very smart folks, I wasn't one of them, who came together and said, hey, let's form a 501c, let's make this official, let's make this formal. So with that, those folks got together, worked with some great attorneys. I know Steve Francis was heavily involved with his, legal background, and we formed a 501c3. So we are officially a 501c3. Obviously, we're very proud of that status, and obviously with that, it brought a lot of structure around what we do and how we do it. And so it's just very exciting. But the one thing I want to share about what I think is the heart of our organization is that we're really here to bring people together to share, right? To network, to take advantage of resources that can help you individually and help us collectively advance diversity and inclusion, and embed it more into our organizations, our schools, our businesses, our nonprofits, so that hopefully one day diversity and inclusion won't be viewed as, oh, that's that political or social or politically correct thing to talk about. It will truly be viewed as a business objective that really does help drive business, and it does help drive how we interact with customers who have different needs, right? And so with that, I also just wanted to share that if any of you are interested in supporting our organization, we're always looking for additional supporters who have some funds, right, to help us operate. Feel free to see myself or Tim Harmon. And with that, I'm also going to ask all of the board and officers of the organization to please stand so that you know who they are if you have more questions about the organization. All right, thank you very much. So, I've been tasked with kind of setting the stage for what is about to happen, and so I briefly just want to share with you how the evening will flow, per se. So obviously, I'll finish up my marvelous remarks that I have for all of you, and then from there, we will ask our president, Tim Harmon, to come forward and just share a very small amount about the business of our organization and how it's run and who some of our supporters are. And then after Tim has a chance to do that, we have a treat for you this evening. I can't take credit for this, but we came across a young lady from Denison University who is going to share her gift with us. And that's all I'm going to say on that piece, right? And then from there, we will get into the main portion of the program, which is having our panelists come forward, so that Tim can ask them some wonderful questions around issues that are impacting our community, right? Issues within Central Ohio. So this is going to be an opportunity for you to reflect and think about things that you can do as an individual, yet also things that you may be able to take back to your organizations as they're thinking about ways to advance diversity and inclusion within their organizations. Also, the conversation may, hit home for you from a personal standpoint. We're going to talk about some things like the large population growth, right, within Central Ohio community, and obviously how diverse that is. And while that's a great thing, we're also going to talk about how the poverty gap is widening, right? And so what does that mean for our organizations? What does that mean for the talent that we're trying to attract? What does that mean as we're trying to get our youth prepared and positioned to be in the workforce, right, and to be leaders? And what does that mean from the standpoint of how do we, as individuals, and how do our organizations provide the right tools and resources so that regardless of what that student or that person looks like or where they come from or what their economic background is, they have equal access, right, to those resources, and our organizations are doing the right things to make sure that we're providing those resources to anyone who is in need of those particular resources. All right? So I will close with that, and now I have the honor of bringing up our president, Tim Harmon.
Good evening. What a great night. It even got nice weather-wise out, right? So you're welcome. We pushed the cold out. We brought the warm air in, got rid of the rain, and I think we're going to have a wonderful night. It's my responsibility simply to keep us on track. The talent is sitting all amongst you. I'm just the facilitator. So thank you all for coming out tonight. I do want to recognize our supporters. So we have lots of supporters in the room, both individual, nonprofit, and corporate. So if you are a supporter, can you just raise your hand real quick, or your organization? All right, so about half, which is great. The other part, how many of you are first-time visitors? You've not come to an event before. All right, so look to your left, right, front, and back. Supporters, introduce yourselves to the new folks. So take just a minute and say hello. Excellent. This is how we grow. This is how our community, both with the CODC as well as Central Ohio, this is how we have the Columbus way. We socialize, we collaborate, we partner, and we grow together. And so if you would like to become more engaged with CODC in our community, again, please engage with any of our officers. You can find us on Facebook, you can find us on LinkedIn, and we will help you understand how to become a supporter. You can become a supporter at a corporate level, at a nonprofit level, or at the individual level. We welcome all, and we grow because each one adds value to the conversation. The other part I wanted to emphasize is a thank you to the folks who came before me who, and I like to use the coin, built the table that we're all sitting at. So thank you to Steve Francis, Shane Doughton, Dave Sullivan, who couldn't be here this evening, and Priscilla Hammonds, so many others who have come in and literally built the table, invited me to have a seat at the table, and it's my responsibility to build the table bigger. Add another leaf. We'll have a kids' table for Thanksgiving. Whatever we got to do, we'll just continue to expand and grow. This event tonight is a reflection of the supporters' commitment to our community, and it's how we're going to continue to evolve CODC and our community. We hold 4 meetings per year on a quarterly basis. We try to theme these so that they're of value to you and to your organization. We help you understand how to truly get a return on investment on your D&I initiatives. We help you set strategy around your D&I initiatives. And we also help you connect with those who have already gone down this journey and have some best practices to share back, but also who are willing to walk hand in hand with you to help you move your organization and you individually forward. So we thank you for that. That's our business meeting portion of these meetings. Efficient, I like it. Next, what I'd love to do is welcome our special guest this evening. And Ira, if we can go ahead and bring some of those lights down a little bit, that would be fantastic. So Priscilla had mentioned that we have a special guest tonight. This young lady came to us via Shane Doughton, and Shane saw her perform about a week ago and said, Tim, we need her at this meeting. Figure it out. Make the agenda work. Make it happen. And I think you're going to find out why here in just a minute. So folks, a little bit of background about the young lady who's coming to present. Sarah Abu Rashid is an 18-year-old poet and speaker. She's originally from Palestine, but was born and raised in Syria. 4 years ago, she moved with her family to Columbus, Ohio, due to the war. And that's when she started writing poetry in English. Sarah has won the Columbus City Poetry Slam 2 years in a row. Her art and poetry have been awarded many times, and her works appeared in over 10 books and literary magazines such as The Voice of Youth and America Library. Sarah has given a TEDx talk, been nominated for a Pushcart Prize at 16, and had her biggest performance yet at the Ohio Theater. Sarah is currently attending Denison University to pursue a degree in international studies, and she aspires to influence literary, social, and political change in the world. Please join me in welcoming Sarah to the stage.
Good evening, everyone. How are you doing? Good. I'm really honored to be here. Thank you, Tim, and thank you, everybody who made this possible. The reason I'm here tonight is because a week ago I performed this poem titled I Am America at the Columbus Arts Center at their awards ceremony. And this is one of my favorite poems because it truly brings people together. The idea for this poem came to me a long time ago, even before the election, and it's when everyone was wrestling with what it means to be an American, and what is it that, as a country, we stand for. Are we united? Are we divided? What do we believe in our system? So please allow me to present to you this poem that I hope unites us, even if slightly. I do not know all of your names, but all of you do know mine. I am America. I am America. I am America, for America is one resilient woman who is loud, proud, strong, whose shoulders shelter continents, whose arms extend and reach beyond oceans. I am America. I am the voice, the face, the body of America. I am America, for I am different. For I know and feel and see and hear and love and accept and defend and embrace and admire my differences. I am America, for I don't want to be like everyone else, for everyone else is not even like everyone else. I am America, for I come from someplace else. آتي من خلف شواطئ المتوسط ولغتي العربية تجهلها ألسنتكم. أنا أمريكا. I am America. I am America, for I too have lost a founding father, a history, a legacy of the old wise men long ago gone. My Constitution is one book they're leaving to dust. I am America, for I too have won a mother. The Statue of Liberty stands tall like the only family virtue you may not find in foreign blood, but you certainly breathe in air. I am America, for I am revolutionary. My revolutions are volcanoes. My voice rises and falls like hot lava on the hands of my oppressors. I am America, that I protest. The Washington March spread like honey in my veins. Yes, honey, I say, because in America we are sweet and we stick together like this. I am America, because no one can divide me. Your borders do not define me. My landscape is my pure dress, being stained with violent blue and bloody red. There are needles being put through me, scissors and sewing machines ready to redesign me, telling me parts of me they like and parts need cut, uprooted, taken out of the streets, out of my insides out. I am America, because I am one. It's all of me, it's all of us, or none. I am America. And oh, dear America, I love you, even at times when you do not love me. I claim you even when you denounce me, when you tell me that I need to go back, that I simply do not belong, when you strangle me, handcuff me at airports, prison me, deport me, I love you still. And I grasp onto you like a child to its mother, even when you let go of me. And I wear your face, America. I wear your face of 13 stripes and 50 stars, even when you're too scared to look into mine. Because I am not ashamed of you. I am ashamed of what they've made you. America, they do not know you like I do. Thank you. Thank you. This is America, and this is the America I believe in, the America we believe in, and the America we are trying to build. What's great about America is not that it's perfect, it's that it's flawed, and that we have every opportunity to speak up and do something about it. 4 years ago, I did not know one word of English, but I translated every single word of every textbook I had until I learned the language. And now I am offered a full-ride scholarship at the most expensive college in Ohio, Denison University. Thank you. So thank you to everybody here who tries to make a difference, even in your own communities, in your own small circles, because this is a country for everyone, and the president must be a president for everyone. It was built by immigrants, it was built by foreigners, and we need to continue that legacy. Thank you.
Wow. Welcome. Thank you, Sarah. I think we've all enjoyed that, and we can reflect on that moment, and we can share it, and we can speak to it from our own frame of reference, and we can internalize it, and then we need to share it externally as well, and invite more people to have these conversations. I appreciate each one of you being here tonight because I think we can continue to move the dial in the right direction for our community and aspire to fulfill the vision that Sarah just outlined for us. I'd like to transition us now and prepare to bring our panelists up. Are we ready? All right. So, our panel this evening has been challenged with basically a simple topic to reflect on the last 11 months and how our community has been impacted since the election of 2016. Those impacts have been felt individually, across the community, across our state, across our nation, across our world. And so as we have this conversation, I think it's important to understand that some of the things that we talk about are going to be data-driven and fact-driven, and we cannot ignore those. These are the changes that are happening. Some of the conversation is going to be emotional-driven, and we must embrace those as well, because that's the fabric of who we are. And I think it will be important that as we go forward, that we look to the individuals who will join us on the panel to be leaders in the community as they have been historically, and for those of us to support their leadership and also to reflect it in our own leadership and organizational ways. So as we begin the panel selection, or the panel entrance, I just again want to thank everybody for taking time out this evening to join us. I think you're going to have a great diversity of folks who will speak to the various impacts that have happened since the election of 2016. With that, I'd like to welcome our first panelist to the stage, Mr. Rob Cohen. Rob is an attorney with Porter Wright. His primary area of practice is immigration and nationality law. He has extensive experience in all aspects of business and family immigration procedure. Rob is a past chair of the Board of Trustees for the American Immigration Council, has served as the Ohio Chapter Chair of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, Chair of the Nebraska Service Center Liaison Committee, and is currently Chair of the USCIS Benefits Liaison Committee. Rob is an alumni of the University of Cincinnati and of Miami of Ohio. Welcome, Rob. Feel free to have a seat there. Next, Mr. Kurt Moody. Kurt Moody is the CEO of Moody Nolan. More than 35 years ago, Kurt Moody decided to start an architectural firm. Driven by a passion to break into a field with little minority representation, he took a considerable risk and opened the doors of Moody & Associates in 1982. At the beginning, the firm was just Kurt and a graduate architecture student. But by the end of the first year, the firm had grown to 9 staff members, 8 of whom are still with the firm today. And today, Kurt, how many offices do you have? 8? 12? 12 across the country. Every single one of us has been in a Kurt Moody facility at some point. I guarantee it, whether you've been to the RPAC at Ohio State or some of the buildings on Columbus State's campus, you've been to the Reeb Avenue Center, you've been inside Columbus Nationwide Children's Hospital, and even more across the nation and beyond our borders. Welcome, Kurt. Our third panelist, Dr. Lisa Codc, CEO of United Way of Central Ohio. Lisa is president and CEO of the United Way of Central Ohio, one of the largest United Way organizations in the country. Under her leadership, United Way is helping to mobilize the Central Ohio community to reduce poverty. Dr. Codc is a PhD psychologist with over 25 years of experience working in nonprofit leadership, having served for over 10 years as the CEO, co-CEO, and clinical director of agencies directly providing services to those living in poverty in Ohio. Lisa currently serves on the Prevent Family Homeless Collaborative. Lisa received her Bachelor's of Arts from Syracuse University, her Master's from West Virginia University, and her PhD from the University of Akron. Please welcome Lisa. Our format this evening will be a series of questions that we have pre-prepared for the panelists. But as true with all CODC meetings, we want these to be inclusive. So we also want you to participate. For you to participate, each of you will see a 3x5 card on your chair. If for some reason you don't have one, just wave your hand and we'll make sure we get some to you. If you have questions, please prepare those, write those out. My colleagues Shane Doughton and Francisco Gomez Belanger will pass along and collect those questions, and then we'll facilitate those to the panel throughout the evening. So as something sparks in your mind and you say, oh, I'd love to get Rob, Lisa, or Kurt's opinion on that, please fill out the questions and we will make sure that we get to those. All right, my panel is ready. Any poems? No, nobody's prepared with a poem this evening. All right. So, again, our topic is to focus around the impact that has occurred since the election of 2016 in our local community. With that, our community is a reflection of the national trends and often a trendsetter. We are known as a test market for many consumer goods, including restaurant concepts, food products, fashion, apparel, and even, thanks to our neighbors at JPMC, we were the first market to have phone apps to scan checks in and out. On more than one occasion in national elections, Ohio has been the key swing state, and Franklin County, a key indicator of the pulse of America. In the election of 2016, the state of Ohio was won by the Republican candidate with a 52% selection for candidate Donald Trump and a 43% selection for candidate Hillary Clinton. Franklin County, which is reflective of the Columbus Metro, was one of only 7 Ohio counties in which a majority of the voters selected Democrat candidate Hillary Clinton at a rate of about 60%. My question, panelists, as you learned of the outcome nearly 1 year ago today of the election of 2016 of our president, what were your initial reactions? Lisa, if you would be so bold as to start us out, do we need to power you up?
It's going to come on, right? It came on. Well, it was utter disbelief, and I, reflecting on it today, because I think I've been numb ever since then. Okay. But your question made me relive it. I just realized that I guess I surround myself with people who think like me. That's what I was most struck by, because it was so unbelievable to me that President Trump had won the election, because everyone that I worked with and talked with was just for sure thinking we had a win with the Democratic Party. And so I really thought I need to make a commitment to hearing other perspectives. But I have to tell you, I haven't done a very good job of it.
Thank you. Kurt?
Very similar reaction. I think, there was just a lot of assumptions that hearing all the different noise that ultimately there was going to be a different outcome. And I think I started thinking about how it happened and the disappointment I had in how was more, well, two things is probably should have got out and done more, assumed too much. And then also I started reflecting on, when people are angry, they make different decisions. And sometimes very, in architecture, just so you know, we studied sociology as part of a need to understand groups of people, how they react in spaces. And part of that is that people, if they are angry enough about something, that they will reason differently than if they're calm and thinking it through. And I saw a lot of, reflected a lot of people being angry that I didn't think, I didn't understand it to the extent that I feel I do today. So that was my reaction.
Thank you, Kurt. And I'll add to Kurt's comment about architecture and people. I worked at Ohio State for 4 years, and there was a tremendous development. It was actually during the time when the RPAC was being built. And I always said, if there isn't a sidewalk there yet, the kids, the students, they'll create a path, and eventually there will be a sidewalk there. And I think that speaks to your notion. Rob, your reaction?
My reaction was very much the same. I'm a poll worker, and so I worked all day at the polls, and I worked in a Republican precinct, and yet Secretary Clinton carried the precinct 2-1. And so when I got in the car about 10:30, 11 o'clock to head for home, I called my wife, and she was in tears. And she said, this is not going well. She's going to lose. And I said, oh, don't be silly. I'll come home and I'll make it right. and I'm not sure exactly how I thought I was going to do that. I literally sat there until 4 o'clock in the morning in tears because I couldn't believe it. I'm an immigration lawyer, as Tim suggested, and he had made immigration a major topic of his campaign. It's the major theme of his presidency, I think, and not in a good way. And so I immediately started to panic for all of the things that I think will happen to my clients. A year later, I can tell you that we thought it was going to be awful. We had no idea. It's actually worse. It's actually worse in ways that we could not have imagined.
I'm going to ask a follow-up. Those were your initial individual reactions. Did any of you take actions within your place of employment, whether it was at the law firm, the architectural firm, or within United Way, or where you were at the time, the Columbus Foundation, and talk with your people? Did you change any of your habits early on after the results of the election of 2016?
Well, I've done a lot of listening to nonprofits who talk about, leaders who talk about actual physical fights that took place with people disagreeing within their organization, and you don't really hear, in our space of nonprofits, you don't really hear people physically fighting in the organization. But working at the Columbus Foundation and working in philanthropy much of my career, I tend not to take a public political side because we don't want to alienate any donor. And, all donors are good donors. And so, no. But also curious that I managed a team of about 15 people, and one person was a Trump supporter. So we were really careful not to alienate her, right? So we didn't discuss it at all.
Kurt or Rob, any changes within your workplace?
I've been with Porter Wright for about 19 years. I don't ever remember as much political discussion around the water cooler, or the coffee pot actually, as we had after last November 8th. It's our reluctance to discuss politics within the office, because I'm sure that it's a politically diverse firm, sort of fell away, and there's a lot more discussion now, not so much today, because I think we're all exhausted, but at least initially we talked about it a lot more.
And same with us. We didn't plan anything. I think the small discussions with different individuals that the next day were just as concerned as I was. There was a need to basically say we still have to continue on a path that we've kind of outlined for ourselves, and not allow something to interfere. And that interference was, quite frankly, attitude. It was the fact that it was apparent we could expect that there would be a different attitude from different people because of emboldenment, things of that nature that we didn't ever think about before. And that has been something that we have had to talk about.
Thank you. Just a reminder to the audience, as you have questions that pop up, write them down, and we'll solicit those from you throughout the evening. So let's move forward to our next question. Here in Central Ohio, we as a community have experienced, candidly, tremendous growth over the last several years. Entering the election of 2016, Columbus was experiencing unprecedented levels of economic growth, capital investment, job creation, a construction boom, and nonstop infrastructure changes, which I can attest to because I can't get anywhere without passing an orange barrel somewhere along the way. And every drive I take takes a few more minutes than it used to. And these are actually many good things that are happening in Central Ohio. At the same time, Columbus is also experiencing the highest in-state jump in suburban poverty, from a 7% rate of our Columbus population in 2000 to over 12% today. To give you some perspective, the federal poverty rate is calculated as $24,300 annual income for a family of 4. In Columbus suburbs alone, we have over 140,000 families who are below the poverty rate. At a time when many of our citizens and corporations are experiencing financial growth, job creation, and a rise, not all boats are rising in the tide in our community. So my question to the panel is this. Through the course of the work you do in our community, what factors do you attribute to the tremendous growth that Columbus is experiencing, while at the same time, the gap that is leaving key members of our community out of that growth? And Kurt, I'm actually going to start with you because I think this is right in your wheelhouse.
Okay. There's a number of things that we see. And I kind of mentioned in the previous statement about being emboldened for certain things. I wasn't speaking that in a positive way. I was speaking of it from a standpoint of there are some things that it's like all of us growing up that you know better to do. You know better than to do. and you're around people that you believe also know you don't act or do things this way. And then you find out that that's been taken away, that now there's it's okay to be a little crude. Well, apply that to economics. You don't have to care as much as you used to. Those people that aren't doing so well, it's their fault. And when you apply that thinking, then as the economy improves, let's say the amount of people that are in that improvement are looking back to see how they can help diminishes. So instead of the attitude of I'm going up and I need to reach back, it's I'm going up and I'm not going to worry so much about those, because that's the prevailing attitude. And that's what leadership does. Leadership presents an attitude for us to consider, to mimic or not. But success is one of those things that for all of those of us that have kids and tried to raise them a certain way, the most difficult thing is, what, at least in our case, was kids seeing something that they wanted to mimic, that you knew they shouldn't, but there was success tied to that other thing. And you're trying to tell them that, no. To success isn't just about what you can get. And that's difficult when you see other actions that are to the contrary. So, and when I talk about the economic conditions, and again, we plan projects for communities that are, some are very underprivileged, others are not. And one of the things we try to do today more than ever before is make sure we don't reduce the quality of our design work because someone has a lower income in their community than the next one. And so, we don't have to worry about them. As long as they get something partially nice, they should be happy. No, we got to design the best thing we can for them, just like we would do with an affluent community. And in today's world, that's kind of like a new thing.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that's what we see when we talk about the disparity of incomes. We see some attitudes that are continuing to maybe not reflect the way that I grew up and tried to raise our kids.
Thank you. And Lisa, with diminishing poverty as a core focus with the United Way, tell us some of your experiences on what's influencing this disparity gap.
So you talk about the federal poverty level, and at the United Way, our Board of Trustees has adopted even a larger definition. And so we are helping to reduce barriers to prosperity for people who live at 200% of poverty or below. And so what we know in Franklin County, that's 418,000 people. That's 1 in 3 people in Franklin County. That's for a family of 4, a family of 3 earning $40,000 a year. So that's one car repair away from perhaps not being able to pay your rent, right? So it's interesting being 8 months on the job and talking with some of my peers. Christina's one of them, who, we do have this platform because we have workplace campaigns and we can go into the workplace and help educate people about the need in our community. That is so great. I'm learning so much about, there are numbers of people who just feel like that people should be able to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. Like, not intellectually, we're not on the same place at all. And are mad at our statistics. Like, that's their problem, that's not my problem. So the economic divide just gets worse and worse and worse. And the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, in my opinion, and I've been working in this community for 25 years. Every day I wake up being an optimist, and wanting to help to use the assets of the organization that I'm with to make change in the community, but it's a big struggle.
Thank you. Rob, from your experience as well as your role in the community for over 50 years.
So, my focus is on the immigrant community, and this has been, as we have struggled for the last year to try and figure out why Donald Trump won. One of the things that has resonated to his base is that immigrants are taking jobs away from us, and it has fostered the us versus them. And for those of us, I was not an econ major, but I did take a couple of econ classes, and the notion that jobs and economic growth is a zero-sum game is just simply not accurate. And I guess a couple of things that I want to point out. I brought with me a 2015 study that was sponsored by the City of Columbus and involved a number of organizations and nonprofits in the Central Ohio community that did a study of the economic impact of refugees in Central Ohio. And the study was not a surprise to those of us who work in this space, but it was enlightening. And if I can, a couple of statistics. They estimated that the refugee population adds about $1.6 billion annually to economic activity in Central Ohio. A large number of immigrants, a much higher percentage, are entrepreneurial and start their own businesses. And this has been really the history of American immigration for the last 150 years. This is not new information. It's consistent. The estimate in the study was that and I found this rather humorous, it supports an approximate 21,273 jobs. I thought that was a pretty specific number for approximately. But the point is that the economic activity from the immigrant population, and particularly the refugee population, which is generally considered to be the poorer immigrants, is truly an economic boon. And in the president's executive order in what we call Travel Ban 1.0, that became 2.0 and then became 3.0, one of the things that he required was that the Office of Refugee Resettlement do an economic impact study on the refugee movement nationally. And of course, his expectation, we won't talk about his intelligence factor at this point, but his expectation was that the immigrants, the refugees, are costing us a fortune, and it's a drain on our economy, it's a drain on our resources, and we can't afford it. Well, ORR study came out exactly the opposite. They found that the study in Central Ohio is really the same set of facts on a national basis. And of course, that's counterproductive for his particular narrative or counter-narrative, and it got buried. But the truth is that the refugee population and the immigrant population is an economic boon. And that's sort of my overall thought when you talk about the economy and how immigration impacts it.
I'll just add that, we're the only city in Ohio that's growing is Franklin County. And the only reason we have population growth is because we have immigrant and refugees moving to our community.
Thank you. And just as an awareness, the study that Rob mentioned, we'll make available on our CODC website, and that's accessible to our supporters. So certainly use your login. If you don't have your current login, just send us a follow-up note, and I'll make sure that you have that access. I want to turn to my colleagues. I think we have a question from the audience, and we'll go to that. And Shane?
So a question from the audience is, aside from possible racial bias, what do you think motivated Trump voters? Aside from possible racial bias, what do you think motivated Trump voters?
my best guess is what I just said. I think he played to the fear that it's either us or them. And to the extent that that is not a racial bias, it's a self-preservation. Maybe that's a little bit nicer way to say the same thing. But I think it's I think it's the impression that economic growth and economic success is a zero-sum game, and if somebody else is getting it, I'm not. And he promised to shake it up, to drain the swamp. That's a whole nother topic, and to get rid of the immigrants. And I think that was a major part.
You know, not being a politician, one of the things I tried to think through is, you know, and those that have run for office would understand better than I do, but I do know that people go out and test the market. They basically say, what will someone respond to? You know, what are the buzzwords? What are the things that might make them interested in our campaign versus the next one? And I happen, during weekends and different things when I'm traveling different places and going to especially small towns and being in small town restaurants, and sometimes you can hear the discussions at the next table and different things of that nature. And during the election period, some of the things I overheard, I was surprised at how much misinformation people had, and I had to be careful because you almost want to stand up and go to the table and say, no, that's not true, you know. But people had information that was like, where did they get that from? And they were moving with it. And then, as I mentioned earlier about attitudes, there were people that I heard and just don't like Hillary. They don't care. They weren't going to vote for her, just don't like her. And it was like, but what did she do that caused you not to like? And they didn't know. And then it's just like a person being interviewed they were talking about Obamacare. What do you feel? They had to get rid of it, and it's terrible. It's the most terrible thing. Then they said, what about the Affordable Care Act? Oh, that's great. And it's like, and these are real people.
Yeah.
And so this is the kind of information that was out there, and it's like, how did we allow this to happen? But this is a fact. This is just the way things went during this last election.
There are lots of schools of thought, but there is one that says a man is always going to be elected before a woman's going to be elected president in our country.
Thank you. Yes, lots of influences. So let's move forward to the next question, then we'll go to the audience again. There's a little bit in that last question, a little bit of conversation around the thought behind the voters. Since the election of 2016, our news headlines have been filled with divisive language and coverage of national and local events with a focus on race relations. It's a challenge for each of us to turn on the TV, to monitor social media, to look in a newspaper and find positive stories or stories that we feel we can share with our children and our families. So my question is this: as a leader within your organization and our community, how have you addressed these events and news stories? And what approaches do you recommend to our audience as they navigate their way through leadership in their organizations during these times?
I'll just start by saying, Shane Doughton has led much of this thought leadership for our organization. And so just some simple things that are really important, given that we have 80,000 people, donors and volunteers on our platform, that Shane's crafted language that we are ready to use when we believe that there's an event that's happened in our community that we don't stand for. So we're ready with that language. It's been approved by senior staff. And so we're also always ready on social media to post what we stand for when there are things going on in our community that we don't stand for. So we're strategic in that way. And I think that's really important to have those tools ready because it happens often and you want to be prepared.
Thank you. Can I ask Shane as a follow-up, when did you prepare those ready statements? How far back did you have those? Did you have them in 2014 or?
No, we did not have them in 2014. We actually prepared them about 2 months ago. And basically, the reason why is because it was stemming from all of the issues from the 2016 election.
Thank you. So again, testimony towards how literally the operations of your day-to-day organization have been impacted over the last 11 months and what we're now prepared for going forward. Rob, any comments on how your organization may have adopted different practices or change?
Well, so I guess the question is, what is my organization? I don't know that Porter Wright feels that it's appropriate in this particular space, but I'm going to change my organization. In your introduction, you noted that I am very active still with the American Immigration Council and the American Immigration Lawyers Association, who are very, very proactive in terms of responding. We now have rapid response teams to respond to the news. For example, on Tuesday, the horrible tragedy in New York, my first reaction, to be honest with you, was I wanted to make sure my daughter-in-law was okay because she lives and works in New York. But and then I began to worry about who the perpetrator was and what kind of blowback would that be. And we found out that he is an immigrant who came on the diversity lottery program, which is a program that was instituted in 1990, and President Trump has now called to rescind that. And I did a quick calculation, a back-of-the-envelope calculation. I think there's been approximately 1.2 million immigrants that have come to this country on the diversity lottery. And this was one very troubled individual, and we read in this morning's papers about a really difficult life, and I'm not sure that we know how he turned, I don't know if radical is the right word or just simply a troubled human being. But AILA, the American Immigration Lawyers Association, and the Council have put out information to try and correct some of the myths regarding the immigrant community, and to blame all immigrants for this is just painful. The other point that I thought of in response to this question is the question of sanctuary cities, which gets a lot of play. And my own sense of sanctuary city is not a defined term. My sense as a lawyer that a sanctuary city is a city that recognizes that the Fourth Amendment is also part of the U.S. Constitution, and that if you want to arrest somebody and detain them in prison, you should have probable cause or a warrant for their arrest. And cities that abide by that principle that's one of the principles of sanctuary city. I think Columbus has done an excellent job. I really am very proud of what the city has done in terms of becoming a welcoming community and imposing or promulgating policies that represent what we think of as the sanctuary city policies, but avoiding the political fallout of using that term. So we have the benefits without the administration's efforts to defund programming and the lawsuits that San Francisco and Chicago have had to institute because they use the toxic term sanctuary city. Columbus has actually implemented the same policies, and I think that's something that we can be very proud of.
Thank you. Kurt, any additional comments?
No, well, what we've tried to do is to continue to coach ourselves into having a positive attitude regardless of the news cycle. And that we keep reminding ourselves that our goal should be to take the high road even when those we're dealing with don't. And that's a difficult thing because we all get angry. I mean, there's certain things that happen that we're all trying to control. You know, you want to fight back and you want to do certain things. And in the climate that we're in today, it's important to continue to remind ourselves that you still can take the high road. And that's difficult, but it's worth doing. So that's the kind of attitude we try to have.
Terrific. It reminds me of a quote I heard once. I think she said, when they go low, we go high.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's turn to the audience again, and Francisco.
Yes, thank you. So some of the questions that we've had from the audience have actually already been addressed by the panel, which I think is wonderful. Great minds think alike. This question is a bit different, though. This person talks about the value of hearing perspectives that are different than you. However, when those perspectives are clearly rooted in the oppression of my identities, I don't want to hear or engage with these perspectives. I don't want to have a conversation with these people. And yet, how do I come to understand these different perspectives? What kind of tools can I use to understand these perspectives without actually engaging in these conversations?
So,
Jump with this. In our firm, years ago, we established a directive that it's called Diverse by Design. But we said that shouldn't just mean our projects, that should mean everything we do. And therefore, when you talk about different people and the conversations and the different things different people represent, we challenged ourselves to go out in the marketplace, and as we looked at hiring people, is that we mimic what we were saying that we wanted to see from our clients. And that is that we wanted to see a high level of diversity, and we needed to be that example. We currently, we represent in our firm 13 different continents. I think we speak 20-something different languages in our firm. And we set up our design studio. Most firms like us have a designer. And when I was working for another firm, I was a designer with another firm. And I would design the projects the way I wanted to do it and just present it. But we found that if we continued the diversity angle, that it meant we needed to have some other viewpoints. And so we established what we call Studio 9, that are 9 different designers that all come together, even though one person has to take it further and talk and work through design ideas from different perspectives, different viewpoints, and those conversations are invaluable to how we continue to grow in the market. So we kind of encourage different opinions, different approaches, different thoughts by creating an environment that allows it and that, that really, pushes for it. And so from our standpoint, those conversations are not off limits because we've created an environment where it is something that we want to see people do. So we encourage the different thinking from the different people that we have in our firm. So that's how we go about it.
thank you. Lisa or Rob?
I'm thinking that we ought to hear from the psychologist on this one.
I think that, there's certainly ways to, what I'm thinking is that there are certainly ways to have people come together and learn from each other. That we only have a certain amount of emotions, and we all have the same emotions. So it's fear, anger, happiness, right? So our actions are all grounded in the same emotions, right? So you can get to that when people agree they want to come together and work together. But what I'm really thinking is, I think in our sector, the nonprofit sector, Many of us are just alike. We think a lot alike. And so there's not a lot of diversity of thought in our sector. And so we often will look, because I feel like we're often talking to each other, and we all agree homelessness is bad, right? So we need a disruptor at the table to say this, most recently the example I'll give you is it's to a coalition to prevent family homelessness, and we were talking about eviction, and we have a higher eviction rate, right, than New York City. Eviction filings. And so we're solving this, us nonprofit leaders, and we're all agreeing with each other. And I thought maybe we should invite a landlord to the table, which was a total disruptor. We learned so much. So I'm rambling, but I just would encourage us, myself, as a leader in the sector, to get more diverse perspectives at the table instead of just to continue to talk to the liberals talking to the liberals.
Yeah, and thank you. In my own experience, I had the privilege of working with L Brands back in my younger days. And right, one of their values, it's in their core, is inclusion makes us stronger. And right, I think when you set that from the very top and it propagates through the entire core of the organization, and you live it and breathe it, and again, this is a decade ago is when this was a part of their values, and they still hold that true, and they reflect it from the retail stores to the corporate environment, and even in the design of their product, and I think that's important. Do we have another question from that? Okay, so we'll move to the next question. Earlier, right, we talked about the economic divide and that it exists. Over the recent 11 months, so since the election of 2016, Columbus has many positive stories. Columbus's population is growing faster than it has ever grown in similar decades. We're growing faster than most any other metro population in the United States. We moved past Indianapolis earlier this summer to become the 14th largest city in the United States. We are a net importer of millennials. 20-somethings are choosing to come to Columbus from Chicago, Memphis, Pittsburgh, Detroit, Indianapolis, even Atlanta, who's also a hot market right now. Throughout the early 2000s, we saw our population grow through a significant refugee population that moved here from West Africa. It included Somalis, Ghanis, Ethiopians, and many more. They chose Columbus to make a new home. We have great colleges and universities and academic infrastructure that has also reversed our brain drain that we spoke about in the newspaper headlines in the early 2000s. Most recently, we've become a chosen destination for a second wave of migration of refugees as we welcome Syrians and Bhutanese and Nepalese into our community at unprecedented rates. And I would low estimate that we have welcomed over 1,000 Bhutanese and Nepalese into our metro this year already. As we approach moving from nearly 1 million people in the metro to projections of 3 million over the next 13 to 15 years. So think 2030, 2035, we could be a population of 3 million in the Columbus metro. My question is this. We need to prepare our companies and our organizations. We need to prepare our communities and our schools for additional growth. It's going to be, by definition, diverse growth. We will not grow because those of us who have been here are going to have enough children to grow the population. It is going to be because others choose this community. So for the panelists, what advice do you have as a diversity and inclusion practitioner, as a community member in our audience? How do we prepare our communities and our organizations for that continued growth and that diversity of growth? Lisa?
I have a couple of thoughts. One is that, we're geographically very large city. We're not very dense. Do you know what the acreage is or how you would? But we're very big, so we don't have the density. So what we have are our own respective ghettos where we live. So I am cautious about what does that mean when we all live with people in neighborhoods with people that typically look like us. And when was the last time you went to the Bhutanese area of Columbus where they live? Right? So that'll continue to grow unless we're intentional about how we work with integration versus this segregation of how we live. And we did a study about the supply and demand of childcare. And this was just a couple years ago, but the number of children that were age 5, 51% were not Caucasian. And my concern and in our work is, wow, are our schools prepared for such a diverse population of children? Because high schools in 10 years are going to look really different. It's really cool, but are we prepared? And we need to be intentional about how we're going to, we need leaders who are intentional about this preparation.
Thank you. And Kurt, you alluded to that in your own firm, right? More than 20 languages, more than 13 nationalities. So it sounds like you're on the curve or ahead of the curve, but how did you get there, and how can we, in our collective organizations and as a collective community, what are some of the initiatives that we can be thinking of or implementing today to be prepared?
Well, again, each, I'm sure that different companies that we all represent have different strategies. But in our case, in our field, in the professional field of, professional services as far as architecture goes, we're fortunate that we're a little ahead of the curve when it comes to overall diversity. But we're not there yet either. And one of the things that happens is there is, as the workforce changes and we need to employ, there are things we have to consider that we have to learn to deal with too. And a good case in point is not everyone who comes is very fluent in English. And we still have some clients that are offended when the person struggles to communicate with them. Very talented individual. You wouldn't want anybody else other than this person, but their communication. So what do we do? Well, it's not going to change overnight, so we have to add someone who can help the communication while the person that is struggling still is able to do the task that they're very good at doing, but their weakness is how they communicate it. So we are having to identify those situations and then try to develop a strategy to address it versus turn away from it. So we're very reality-based, and that is, what are we handed? I mean, growth in this community is being done through more immigrants than it is by those that were here. And we are not going to go out and change that. So it's a matter of, okay, how do we then make the best of it? And so that's kind of the approach we use. And there are some schools that we've worked with that are very, very good at that right now. They have special programs, and they are acknowledging that their students are international. And there's more international schools that are starting to come up to try to address that variety of how many different nationalities that now they're having to educate and ways to go about it. And that's proactive. And I think the goal is for all of us to understand that we may have to be more proactive in addressing those issues because it's not going to go away.
Thank you. And Rob?
So I guess my perspective, I sometimes I like to take personal credit after practicing immigration law for almost 40 years now, for the number of Indian restaurants in the Sawmill Corridor, or the Ethiopian restaurants, and others. We're under siege in this administration. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts. And when you're talking about immigration, you're talking about the regulation of immigration. The devil is in the details. Excuse me. And the details have become very difficult. But we're fighting. We're fighting back. I'm encouraging my corporate clients to persevere and don't take no for an answer. We just keep plugging along and fight back wherever we can. And we have 1,169 more days to go.
Not that anybody's keeping count, but
Not that we're
you.
counting. Not that we're counting.
Thank you. Well, we're nearing the conclusion of our evening together. I want to give each panelist an opportunity to kind of give some closing remarks on anything that we haven't touched on, or something that you might want to tell an accomplishment story over the last 11 months that you are proud of in our community, and share that with the audience. And I think I'll go in reverse order of how we just went. So Rob, if you have some closing remarks, I'd welcome those.
Well, so one of the things that I guess a bright spot, I'm on the board of Community Refugee and Immigration Services, CRIS, one of the resettlement agencies. And when the travel ban 1.0 came, we realized that the refugee admissions were going to drop considerably. And our budget is based upon the number of refugees that we resettle. So when the number drops by 50%, the budget drops. And of course, we're staffed up for a certain number of refugees, and all of a sudden it's 50%. And so we started looking at how we were going to deal with that. And at the same time, we started noticing an uptick in unsolicited donations. And all of a sudden, people that we'd never heard of were sending us checks for $500 or $1,000 or $20. And all of a sudden, we had fundraising without doing an effort. People in the community looked at CRIS and said, we need to support that agency. And I'm told that there's a few resettlement agencies, us together and the Ethiopian ETTS, I'm not sure what.
Ethiopian Talawanda Social Services.
Okay, and I can never remember what ETTS stands for, but all of them have had the same experience. The community has banded together and has said, these organizations do good work. They support good people. We need to counteract the prejudice and the anti-immigrant sentiment, and donate money. And it's been heartwarming. It's heartwarming for the staff. It's heartwarming for the refugees themselves, who understand that we're in somewhat of a we call it the current environment, for lack of a better term. But that has been a real bright spot.
Amen. Thank you, Kurt.
Rather than we've been fortunate as a company. We've been blessed since I've started the company, and so there's many stories that I could tell, and so. But rather than tell one of those stories, I want to suggest something that since the last election and trying to do more, that I think is worth consideration. Many of the individuals in this room have some talents that you may not have considered that the country, our communities are in need of right now. That if you kind of do a self-evaluation, you might find that you have some talents that you didn't know you had. And I want to reference that by saying, I spoke at a graduation ceremony several years ago at Ohio State, and I just researched something that I think is a key to new leadership. We're all it was a graduating class. They were going out in the world and getting ready to take on the task, And one of the things I found that we've systematically kind of started lacking is balance, balance in our lives. And there were two ingredients that a leader that really, I think, does well has that sometimes we forget about. We're all recognizing smartness. We'll say, boy, that individual is smart. They are just the smartest people we ever seen. And sometimes we're selecting based upon that. And I'm here to tell you that I don't believe that if that is the only quality, that is someone that should be elected. What you need is the second quality, common sense. And it's true. There is a need to have judgment where data of any kind isn't the final solution. Look up here, the percentages say this, make a judgment. Real people are involved. Someone has to say, okay, that's some trends. Now, let's look into the people that this affects. And what have we experienced in our lives that leads us to believe that this is the right decision? And that judgment call of with education, smartness, and common sense is the answer. And I coined the phrase smart, dumb people. There's a lot of people that are leaders that are smart but dumb as can be when it comes to the common sense of dealing with people. And we've got to turn that around. And many of you have those traits. You have smartness, you have common sense. It needs to be applied to leadership. So some of you should consider a career in politics that you might not have thought about, because we need those voices that are not just driven by some of the conditions that we see today. So that's my thought.
Excellent point. Thank you. Lisa?
I'll close with a shout out to Shane. So we're evolving our work and in diversity and inclusion. And Shane and many of our teammates are starting an diversity and inclusion think tank. So stay tuned. That'll be launched early in 2018, and we're going to shake up the way we do our work.
Terrific. Well, please join me in thanking our panelists this evening. This has been terrific. This is why we do what we do. We need to continue these conversations. They need to happen together. They need to happen in the car on the ride home. They need to happen over the telephone. They need to happen in conference rooms. They need to happen across our community. And we need to continue to further the evolution of Central Ohio and make Central Ohio a benchmark of how diversity and inclusion can happen and should happen. So again, thank you all. Have a wonderful night. Be safe in your travels. Enjoy.